I'm Extra Life. Welcome back to The Synth. Last time we talked about how to program a sequence on the Super 16, how to use the basic sequence functionality, and today I would like to get into a little bit more depth, talk about some of the more advanced and under-the-hood features that this thing has to offer. So let's get up close and talk about the front panel. So last time we talked about how to use the rhythm grid, which is these 16 buttons here, how to use the knobs to control the various parameters, and how to use the patch selection screen to load and store patches. But of course, there's also a bunch of other stuff on the front panel, like these secondary functions down here. And this has to do with the Shift button, you can see, which has the outline text here. So when we press and hold Shift, we can access any of these additional parameters. So if you press Shift and press 15, we'll clear the sequence, which removes all of the sequence data. We talked about how to program a rhythm using these buttons here, which you can just turn steps on and off. But there's also a more real-time way to program a rhythm that I'll show you right now. If we press play, I've got a drum pattern going on my other sequencer, so we'll hear that. Now if we press and hold Shift and press record, we can tap in a rhythm, and it will record each of the steps where they land and for how long. Now we can use Shift on these secondary functions to alter the various parameters you see. Last time we talked about steps and how you can adjust the length of the sequence. You can also adjust its tempo, which right now is 120 BPM. If we add some more notes, you'll be able to hear how the swing timing works, which we do Shift 12. Dial in some pretty extreme values. Some kind of New Jack Swing styles. We're down at 50%, we get our default 50-50. And values less than 50, we get negative swing, which sounds very weird. By the way, this also works with the external clock, so if you're clocking it in at a regular interval, you can add swing and it will offset every other note by this amount. And that is patched out through to the clock, so the clock output is swung along with the internal sequence, which is why the drums are now in sync. Of course, the sequencer is more fun when we program in some melodic and rhythmic data as well, so let's clear the scale and program in a bunch of notes. To start with, I'll just program in all the notes from 0 to 12. If we press play on that sequence, we get a chromatic scale, which is what we'd expect because we're just programming in each semitone one after another. Of course, we might not be interested in playing in a chromatic scale. We might want to restrict ourselves to a major scale, so we can access the scales parameter and choose different scales by pressing Shift 11. This brings up a menu where we can adjust using the encoder which scale we're in. So if we press play, choose the scale mode, change from chromatic to a major scale. And all the notes that we've already recorded in will be automatically quantized to the nearest scale degree. Here's a minor scale, a pentatonic scale, a minor pentatonic, blues scale, minor blues, Phrygian scale, and a Dorian scale, and finally a whole tone scale. Most of the time for playing Western music, you use either a major or a minor scale. course, all of our original chromatic note data is preserved, so if we want to go back to the chromatic scale, each step is still playing where it was before. But if we program in new note data, you can see we only choose from the scale degrees that are in the minor scale, or whatever scale we've selected. Of course, anytime we're programming a new melody, we might want to play it in sync with other instruments, and they already might have some melody or sample they're playing in tune with. So the 0 value that we start from might not be the root note of a scale for our other instrument, and for that we can use the transpose function. So if we press play, and press Shift 13, we can just add a number of semitones, and transpose the entire sequence up or down. So the tempo, the steps, the scale, swing value, transposition are all stored with the sequence itself with the patch. So if we save this to a new patch, we can come back to it later and it will be in the same key with the same tempo and the same timing. Also, before I forget, the glide feature on the sequencer is super fun. For any given step, you can activate a glide or slide, which is sort of inspired by the TB303 version of it, which will ramp the pitch from the previous step's value over to the next step's value in a linear way over the course of that step. So if we activate it on this simple sequence, if we press Shift and glide, we can also adjust the length of that slide, so we can make it much longer, or nice and short. And now, last but not least, let's talk about the fun part, which are these mutations or rhythm effects that we've got on this mutate button down here. And you've probably seen me play around with some of these in previous videos, but I'll just show you how they work. So if we press play, and if we press and hold mutate, we've got a beat repeat, and if we adjust the dial while we're holding it, we can adjust the number of steps we repeat. Super fun for improvising, creating kind of new sequences on the fly, but that's not all that we've got. So from the top, we've got repeat, and we change this by pressing Shift and mutate, and then adjusting the dial. So we've got repeat, reverse, octave shift, transpose, auto glide, freeze, stop, randomize, stutter, and roll. And let's go through each of those. So repeat you've seen, reverse is pretty self-explanatory, there's not much control to it, but it starts playing the sequence backwards as soon as you hold it, from wherever you hold it. So this is a great way to add in rhythmic variations using the notes that you've already got in a sequence so it doesn't change things up too much. After that, we've got octave shift, which lets you jump up in increments of 12 semitones. Or down as well. One of my favorite ones to use in improv. After that, we've got transpose, which is a smart transpose feature and shifts the entire sequence up or down in semitone intervals, but also still conforms it to whichever scale you've had selected. This is a great way to add in melodic or chord variation while still keeping the same scale that you've selected and keeping your sequence in key. After transpose, we've got auto glide, which does the same thing as the glide button, but for every step as long as you're holding it down. And we can shorten or lengthen the glide curve as well. just a great way to add rhythmic fills and changes. After that, we've got freeze, which is fairly self-explanatory. That just activates the gate and holds whatever current pitch was last played. After that, we have an effect called stop, which is sort of like stopping a vinyl record. It pitches down over the course of several steps. And you can adjust the number of steps with the dial. And again, that's great in combination with a solo or mute. After that, we have randomize, which is one of my favorites. When you hold this down, it adds upwards or downwards variation, which is again conformed to the scale you have selected, to create non-repeating or semi-random variations in your sequence. And you can adjust the amount of randomization applied with the dial. Another one of my favorites after that is stutter, which you press and hold to add in additional repeated steps after the ones already in the sequence. And you can adjust the length and gate duration of those steps with the dial. And that works, of course, really well with short gate lengths where you can hear that silence between each step. And finally, we have roll, which works in a similar way to stutter, but it lets you choose a number of subdivisions for each step while it's held down as well. So we can add kind of latches or ratchets to each step. And we can subdivide into really crazily small steps we want. And of course, the gate output is pulsing really rapidly, so sometimes we may or may not have an envelope that responds quickly enough to actually hear it. And then again, at just one subdivision, it behaves the same as stutter. Now, one feature people have been asking about a lot is the ability to record mutations. And while this wasn't in the original spec, this is a feature that I've just wrapped up last night, so hopefully it works correctly. So let's try and record a couple mutations in for this stutter onto a couple steps in the sequence. If we don't like what we've recorded, we can press and hold record, and then tap mutate to start recording the mutation data. And just continue holding while we want to erase the data we recorded. Of course, we can also record in data for other types. So I'm going to add in randomize here. So now we have a section of the sequence which is automatically randomized and doesn't repeat. So there you go. That is a look at advanced sequencing on the Super 16. Got into some fun mutation types as well as all of the front panel controls for advanced sequence settings. And again, those are all saved with the sequence, including the mutation type and depth. Right now, the mutation automation data isn't saved with the sequence, but I should be able to wrap that up so that that works properly in the next day or two. I think the only thing we haven't talked about is the calibration procedure, which I will go over in depth in the manual as well as probably in another video. It's not that difficult, but you do need either a tuner or a multimeter to set the voltage output accurately. Anyway, I think that about does it. Hope you enjoyed that look into the advanced features on the Super 16. It does a lot more than it might seem, but hopefully it's easy enough to understand. If there's anything that you think I've left out or you're confused about, just let me know in the comments down below. Thank you as always for watching. I will see you next time.